Hello and welcome to Take Time. I'm your host Patrick Marlett, and today we are talking about jellyfish. In particular, the Irukandji. And here in my hand we have the Irukandji by Matthew & Sons Mass Watches. The Irukandji is a small jellyfish, much like our watch here, but similarly to the YouTube comment section, it can be very toxic. And that was the inspiration for our project watch today. This is a prototype of the forthcoming Irukandji. There are 3 different flavors of this watch, and it is a first from the brand. It will be officially launched over on Kickstarter come June 7th. As stated, this is a prototype of the up-and-coming Kickstarter watch, and of course there will be differences between this and the end product, some of which I'll be able to discuss today, as I know that these changes are certain. However, I do want you guys to know, full disclosure, Matt of Mass Watches will be sending me a production unit to keep after this review. Will that change my opinion of it? Some of you will think so, some of you won't. If you're a fan of the show, you know that doesn't sway me. So let's just dive right into this, and I'm going to start with what I know is changing about the prototype, and a slight disappointment for you guys that enjoy these. There will be no loom shot for this video. Unfortunately, the loom on this prototype isn't accurate to what the consumer will receive. For starters, the bezel insert here. I know Matt isn't dissatisfied with this, but I know he wants it to be better. So he's looking to get a new ceramic insert with deeper engraving so that he can apply a more generous amount of loom to the insert. So there will be a superior glow to the loom found here. And it was adequate from what I could tell, but better loom is always better, particularly when it comes to dive watches. Also, the loom on the hands and dial, that is changing as well. We're not going to take a look at it today, but the handset and dial actually have different colored loom, one in green and one in blue. Ultimately, Matt rested on blue for the loom for the end product, so any customers buying into this will receive blue loom on the handset and dial. Now, beyond those changes, that's all I know to be significantly improved upon between the prototype and the end product. And currently, as I mentioned, there's only 3 dial variants. There's a Reef Blue, Stinger Pink, and Deadly Black. I was told that there may be, should stretch goals be met, 3 more dial options to be chosen, not only by the backers, but by Matt and Sons. So we'll see what happens there. But I know they're going to be citrus themed. And should you back the Irukandji, you'll receive the dive watch itself on a 2-piece nylon strap, which I'll showcase in just a second, a rubber or canvas strap of your choosing, as well as a watch roll and a 2-year warranty supplied with the product. Now, I have personally been wearing this product on this toffee brown Barton leather strap. It's a quick release strap, so is the nylon option that this is supplied with. Of course, we'll talk about the nylon option today, but if you're wondering if this comes with a watch, it does not. I just enjoyed the pairing, and it's nice that the item it came with was quick release, so it gave me the opportunity to throw this on a bunch of straps I have laying about. But how has this watch been in day-to-day use? That's the real question. That's what you all want to know. And I'm happy to say I really enjoyed my time with it. There are a few odd quirks to it. However, I think it's a really decent diver. The Irukandji is made out of 316L stainless steel, and it's brushed all over. And despite featuring a quick release nylon 2-piece strap, you do also receive drilled lug holes. So if you like switching your straps out, this is a great way to do that. There's also a domed sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating. The AR coating has gone on the underside of that crystal. The insert and bezel itself will click around the dial at 120 clicks. You also have a signed crown over at the, and this is pretty quirky, you have it over at the 10 o'clock position. This is not too unlike where you'd find the helium release valve on an Omega Seamaster. So that's a little odd. You have to get used to that, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, the case itself is 200 meters water resistant. Of course, you have a Irukandji on the back. That's the jellyfish we were referring to just earlier. So there's a mixture of brushed and polished surfaces showcasing this guy, and just underneath that case back is an NH35. Pricing for this product is going to start around 329 Aussie dollars over on Kickstarter, but for us US buyers, it's going to be right around $230 for those first early bird backers. The case measures 42 millimeters in diameter, and in case you're wondering, the bezel's diameter is 39.5. It's 46 millimeters from lug end to lug end, and those lugs feature 20 millimeter widths. The case itself is 15 millimeters thick, though you don't really notice it in day-to-day use. The case from the back to the top of that bezel is roughly 13.13 millimeters thick. So how has the jellyfish been in day-to-day use? Well, as with all my reviews here on the channel, I like to start with the bad and then move on to the good before giving my final verdict on a review item. So let's talk Irukandji. My first bad note in regards to the Irukandji is that crown placement. It's a bit of an oddity over at the 10 o'clock position, and I can understand why it's there. For those of us that wear our watch on our left wrist, this is good and out of the way. This is the most out of the way your crown can be. Even at the popular 3 or 4 o'clock position, some crowns do tend to dig into your wrist, so I see why you would put it over here. However, it does make time setting a bit awkward at first. Of course, it's a learning curve you get over. But when I set the time and date on this watch, I find myself doing this. I'll go ahead and unscrew the crown and set my time and date that way instead. It's not that I can't train myself to do it this way. It's just an odd experience. And again, it feels more novelty than, a functional choice here. And I say that because we could have just as easily put this at the 4 or 3 o'clock position and had the crown recessed into the case more so that it wouldn't dig into your wrist. And the way this case sits on your wrist, the crown is gravitating pretty far off of it. So it didn't seem like a necessary choice, but it is something that makes this watch more distinguished above its competitors. And in that $300 range, you do need to make these stylistic choices, in my opinion, to have your product stand out. So I do get why that's there. I don't know if it's practical, but it's cool. My next bad note is in regards to the 2-piece nylon strap that came equipped with the Irukandji here. You'll notice that it's color matched, or at least it's trying to be, with the watch head itself. Now, I don't like matching color tones of my accessories to my watch head for a few reasons. I feel like these could have just as easily been complementary colors or something to make the watch head pop out more. Instead, we have a blue color tone that's more of a dark navy that doesn't really match with the dial or bezel insert aesthetic. It's not a good look in my opinion, and why I wasn't really wearing this watch head on this strap. Otherwise, the nylon strap is fantastic. It wears very well and it's constructed well. The only thing is I don't like the styling or the color matching. I think we should have just gone for a neutral tone here, either a beige, a gray, a black, you name it. In regards to the black dial, you could have given that a tan nylon strap instead. That way the watch head will stand out just a little bit more. I feel like these matching strap options really does detract from the watch head, and that could just be me. And what is your preference if you guys are watching this? Do you like matching the color of your strap to your watch head? It really bugs me when the dial and the color tone of your strap are so far from each other. It doesn't really do anything for me. And that's just a very nitpicky complaint on my end. I know that personally, but I would never wear this strap when coupled with this watch head. I'd probably just wear whatever rubber option this came with instead. And my last complaint in regards to color again is with the seconds hand. If you look very closely at the seconds hand, you'll notice that the counterbalance end has the lollipop loom pip on it, and it's painted blue on that end. And halfway down the seconds hand, you'll see it right there in the middle. It cuts off, the blue cuts off halfway across that seconds hand. I kind of wish that either just the stick and lollipop were blue, and or that circular area where it meets the pivot arm, I believe that's what it's called, was entirely blue as well. This look just appears unfinished in my opinion. If that can be changed with the production units, I think that would be good. Either way, whether the arm and lollipop were blue and or that center area was entirely blue, I just don't like how it cuts off halfway. It's a little distracting. Again, minor nitpick, that could just be me, but it does bother me when I look at this dial. Lastly, and I know a lot of folks are going to complain about this, it's a 200-meter diver and it's pretty thick. I think because of how it wears on the wrist, it's very similar to a Seiko tuna without the shroud. It feels very much like that on the wrist, and it wears very small. So I don't mind if a watch has a short lug-to-lug length, this being 46, and small-ish diameter, it being 42. If it wears a little thicker, that's fine. So long as two of those three things falls well within my wrist, I don't mind if one dimension is enlarged. So that's a neutral note for me. I don't mind it being on the thicker end, it being 15 millimeters thick. I know that's going to bother some of you, so do bear that in mind. But I will say it doesn't wear like a big watch when you have it on your wrist. And of course, we'll see what this looks like on the wrist in just a moment. Now let's get to some of those good notes. And you know what? I've mentioned this in a lot of videos prior, and one just recently. I love triangle markers. I don't know what it is. Some older Tudor subs used to do this too, but I like having the triangle markers at the 3, 6, 9, and 12 position. For me, it just really helps with legibility. I'm able to easily distinguish what is, north, south, east, west, those cardinal directions on my dial. It helps me align the handset with the rest of the dial, so I can very easily tell what time it is. And in much the same fashion with this watch here, it's doing the same thing. Although I do like their take on the triangle markers. They're not complete triangles. You'll notice that the tips of those triangles have been cut. And it provides a really unique look to this dial. I actually quite like how that was executed. And while we're taking in the dial, this has one of the nicest sunray finishes I've seen in a while. They call it a sunburst blue. This is a reef blue. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's done a lot better than a lot of competitors. In particular, I'm thinking of Seiko within this range. A lot of Seikos have a matted sunburst finish. I'm not quite a fan of that. It does help with legibility in direct sunlight, but for the most part, this look here is much more favorable in my opinion. It doesn't have that matte finishing on the texture of the dial. It's just beautiful and polished and really poppy. And I think that's obviously what Matt was going for with this design here, but it is just more attractive because of that. Though it does give the dial a more dressy appeal, I wouldn't have my sunburst any other way. Also, you'll notice that the Loom itself is really piled up on there. I've seen a lot of companies coming out with what they call 3D Loom. If you like the appearance of that on your dial, well, you're getting it here. Now, the action on the bezel itself is fine. It's 120 clicks, and it's got a lot of back play. You'll notice that here. But it does align neatly with the dial, and due to that back play, you can kind of adjust it even if it didn't. But it's your standard 120 click bezel. Nothing to write home about, but it functions just fine. It does have a tinny noise to it that may bother some. If you don't like that clicky sound, well, it's quite audible. It may bother some, but I mean, when you're using the bezel, you're setting it and forgetting it. So, I wouldn't stress out too much on that. So I mentioned it's very similar to the Seiko tuna. I'll also state that by extension, it's also somewhat similar to the Seiko bottle caps. I believe that's the nickname they've coined for those perfectly round Seikos that look similar to bottle caps. It does have a very Seiko-like vibe, but in some regards, like with the dial, I think it's executed better. And of course, you're getting the reliability of an NH35 on the inside too. So there are Seiko-like qualities, but it's very much a different watch. And with the prices of Seiko steadily increasing and the style of the models within their more budget-friendly ranges becoming increasingly ubiquitous, it's nice to see brands coming out of the woodworks with watches that feel familiar but are uniquely their own. And I think mass is a really interesting proposition in that regard. For the price, you wouldn't find a Seiko that featured a similar or same NH35 movement with a ceramic insert and sapphire glass. And I know for a lot of us, if we're checking off boxes, those are things we like in our watches. So props to you, Mass, for making a nice product at a good price range. And on that note, why don't we take a look at what the Irukandji might look like on your wrist. Now, the styling of this watch is definitely not for everyone. Again, I think if you like the look of a Seiko bottle cap or a Seiko tuna, you'll likely enjoy the look and feel of this watch on the wrist. But here is an Irukandji in reef blue on a 7¼ inch wrist. That's what it'll look like for all of your admirers. And when you are going to admire it, it's going to look a little something like this. And here is the Irukandji on my 7¼ inch wrist. And you can see what I'm talking about. You know, the strap pairing here just feels uneventful. I would rather have this on a beige strap, and that way the blue dial would pop out so much more instead of being paired with a blue strap. Again, that could just be me, but I would prefer a different colored strap instead. And the watch itself on the right wrist, like I said before, you know, that crown, the way that the case sits on the wrist, that crown isn't going to come near your wrist anyways. So it is a little gimmicky to have that crown up there, but I do like that they went for something different. And you know, one thing I didn't note when we were taking in the watch earlier is that date window. It's executed very well. It's perfectly in line with where it should be. I like the application here. And again, very similar to my tuna, it reminds me of how the date is applied there. It has gone without a loom plot adjacent to it. And I kind of like that. I don't know. It's just something I've grown accustomed to. I know some folks would prefer that, you know, all those hour markers be loomed up, particularly as this is a dive watch, but it doesn't bother me too much. You know, all of my dive watches have sort of just become desk divers at that. You know, I'll occasionally swim with them or go to the beach with them, but it's not like, you know, I'm desperate for loom on my dial. But there you go. There's the Irukandji on my 7¼ inch wrist. So who exactly is the Irukandji for? In my opinion, it's for folks that enjoyed what Seiko was, how they used to produce watches. Very affordable, mid-range dive watch models that didn't break the bank, but made you feel like you were wearing something unique. Personally, I believe that Mass Watches is offering a great product for the price. And I know it sounds like I was hating on Seiko a lot in this video, but if you are a longtime subscriber and fan of the channel, you'll know that a majority of my collection is built up on Seiko. I love what they produce and I collect a lot of their vintage products, but they're not quite the same these days. I think what Mass is producing here is similar to what got me really excited about divers when I started collecting. A watch that was affordable, didn't break the bank, and really felt special on the wrist. It's really capturing the essence of those Seiko divers that got me into collecting. And if that's what Mass is going for, I think they really nailed it. Now, if you enjoyed this video or found it in the least entertaining, feel free to hit that like button. It looks a whole heck of a lot like this guy. If you have friends, forums, or groups that are interested in the Mass watch, well, feel free to share this video with them first so they can get another consumer's opinion on the product. Also, if you're new to the channel, well, welcome. I do videos like this monthly. So if you enjoy watch content, feel free to slam that subscribe button. And while you're down there, you can hit the little bell icon just next to that to be alerted as to when my videos air. Again, my name is Patrick Marlett, and thank you for the time.